Before cities, before farming, before anyone even thought about writing, humans were locked in a daily battle just to stay alive. And sometimes, survival meant breaking the deepest taboos we know today. Archaeologists keep finding the same haunting signs in ancient bones, deliberate cut marks, cracked skulls, and even drinking vessels fashioned from human heads. This wasn't an isolated nightmare whispered in one corner of history. It happened across almost every branch of our family tree. Cannibalism wasn't a freak occurrence. It was a repeated, tangible part of prehistoric life. But why? Was it purely the last resort of a starving group? Was it a sacred rite meant to honor the dead? Or was it the ultimate act of domination, meant to erase rivals completely? Picture an Ice Age night, freezing winds slicing through animal hide clothing, predators pacing just beyond the firelight, and your group huddled together with nothing left to eat. The choice isn't between meat or plants. It's between eating nothing at all or eating one of your own. In those moments, the moral lines we live by now blur, bend, and break. But hunger wasn't the only force driving this. In some ancient cultures, consuming another human was spiritual, a way to preserve their essence, their strength, their memory. To them, it was not defilement, but a merging of lives. For others, it was warfare stripped to its most brutal form. Killing an enemy wasn't enough. You consumed them, erasing their body, their spirit, and their very identity. In both cases, the act carried a power that went far beyond feeding the stomach. Starvation changes everything. Imagine a small group stranded in the icy mountains, surrounded by silence so heavy it feels alive. Game has disappeared, plants are frozen solid, and the horizon holds no promise of rescue. Days bleed into weeks. At some point, a body lying in the corner is no longer just a friend, a brother, a leader. It becomes the only thing standing between the group and death. This is survival cannibalism, born from necessity, not malice. We've seen it even in modern times: shipwrecks, wartime sieges, isolated expeditions pushed past the limits of endurance. Now place that same desperation in the Paleolithic era, where there was no stored grain, no preserved meat, and no certainty of when, or if, the next hunt would succeed. In that world, every decision was stripped of sentiment, reduced to survival's blunt equation: eat, or watch everyone around you die. There was no heroism, no villainy, only the cold logic of staying alive. And in the stillness afterward, the cut marks etched into ancient bones became silent records of the impossible choices our ancestors had to make. There were no supplies to ration, no clever storage systems, no secret stash of food waiting for the right moment. Every meal was whatever you could scrape from the frozen ground, pry from the grip of winter, or take from the dead lying beside you. In that kind of world, there was no space for debates about morality. Cannibalism wasn't a question of right or wrong. It was survival stripped to its bare, cold logic. The only goal was to keep a child breathing for one more night, to give the group even the smallest chance of finding food before the cold, predators, or hunger claimed them all. And the cruel truth was that the body on the ground wasn't always a stranger. It could be a sibling whose voice still echoed in memory, a parent who once carried you, or a leader who had guided you through past dangers. Hunger didn't erase grief, but it smothered it under urgency. The act itself was quiet, methodical, flesh stripped, bones cracked for marrow, nothing wasted. Those ancient cut marks, still visible today, are not just evidence of violence, but of desperate, deliberate choices made in the shadow of death. To us now, it's almost impossible to imagine. To them, it was simple math. Eat, or everyone dies. And the cruelest truth was that the body in front of you wasn't always a stranger. It might be a sibling whose laughter still echoed in your mind, a parent who had carried you on their back, or a leader whose voice once gave orders that kept you alive. In those moments, grief and hunger didn't cancel each other out. They tangled together, twisting into something darker. The instinct to survive didn't just overpower every other feeling. It silenced them. That is the reality carved into those prehistoric cut marks. Each one a mute testimony to choices no human ever wanted to make, but many had to. Not all cannibalism was born from desperation or starvation. Some of it was deliberate, steeped in ritual, and loaded with meaning. In certain ancient cultures, consuming the flesh of the dead was seen as a way to keep them close, a belief that their life force, their strength, and even their wisdom could continue within the living. Far from an insult, it was considered an honor, a sacred gesture that allowed a person's essence to remain part of the community. But there was also the complete opposite: war cannibalism. This had nothing to do with love or remembrance. It was about power, dominance, and sending a message. Enemies weren't just killed, they were consumed. It was the ultimate act of erasure, stripping them of their body, spirit, and place in the world. Archaeological sites like Gough's Cave in England reveal human bones bearing butchering marks identical to those found on hunted animals. Skulls were sometimes hollowed out and repurposed into bowls, at once trophies of victory and warnings to anyone who might challenge them. And when humans of different species met, Cro-Magnons, Neanderthals, or Homo heidelbergensis, the boundary between enemy and prey could vanish. Sometimes conquest wasn't just about land or resources. It was about claiming the bodies of those who had fallen. Cro-Magnons, our Ice Age ancestors, weren't just another human group. They stood tall, strong, and moved with purpose. Average height, around 5 feet 9 inches to 6 feet 1 inch, towering when you compare it to the 5 feet 3 inches average of a medieval European. Neanderthals, on the other hand, were shorter, stockier, and built like tanks, relying on sheer power in close-range ambush hunts. Cro-Magnons played a different game. They kept their distance, used throwing spears, laid traps, and worked in tight, coordinated teams. When food became scarce, that tactical edge could turn deadly. An isolated band of Neanderthals wasn't just competition for hunting grounds. They could be seen as an opportunity. In Cro-Magnon culture, cannibalism wasn't an unthinkable act. Evidence from Gough's Cave shows they butchered and ate members of their own kind, so extending that practice to another human species may not have been a huge leap. This wasn't about open war or endless battles. It was about precision. Ambush them during migrations, catch them at a water source, intercept them near prime hunting spots. Quick, efficient, final. In some parts of Europe, Neanderthals vanished within a few generations of Cro-Magnon arrival. Coincidence? Maybe. But the bones, the cut marks, and the repeating pattern suggest something far more deliberate. A slow, calculated replacement. Picture this. A warrior emerges from the shadows, his face hidden behind the jawbone of a wild boar, crowned with the antlers of a deer, and lined with human teeth embedded into the mask. In the flicker of firelight, the features are distorted, almost supernatural. And that's exactly the point. Bone masks weren't costumes for celebration. They were instruments of fear. Archaeological finds from Paleolithic and Mesolithic sites reveal these masks were carefully crafted from both human and animal remains, shaped with intention. Every curve, every drilled hole, every polished edge served a purpose. They weren't meant to look beautiful. They were meant to command. In battle, they froze enemies in place before a weapon was ever raised. In rituals, they projected dominance and authority. Within a tribe, they marked leaders, shamans, or elite hunters as figures set apart from ordinary members. Wearing the bones of a rival or the remains of a powerful beast was more than decoration. It was a statement of ownership, a declaration that their strength, their spirit, is now mine. The mask became psychological armor. In a time without written words, symbols carried the weight of entire stories, and nothing spoke louder than the lifeless face of the dead staring back at the living. Hundreds of thousands of years before us, Homo heidelbergensis roamed vast stretches of Europe, Asia, and Africa. They were physically powerful, highly skilled hunters, and remarkably adaptable for their time. But every day was a battle against a harsh, unpredictable world. In Spain's Cima de los Huesos, Pit of Bones, archaeologists uncovered the remains of at least 28 individuals, deep within a cave. These bones bear unmistakable cut marks and fractures consistent with marrow extraction. The placement wasn't random. Bodies were deliberately deposited in this remote, hard-to-reach chamber, hinting at ritual significance. Was it a burial ground, an altar, or perhaps both? When resources ran thin, survival cannibalism made practical sense. But certain details point to something deeper than hunger. Perhaps a belief that consuming the dead could transfer their essence, strength, or spirit into the living. These same sites reveal signs of tool-making, organized social structures, and even care for the injured, proving they weren't mindless brutes. For Homo heidelbergensis, the human body could carry many meanings: a sacred vessel of spirit, a symbol of power, a connection to the community, and, in the cruelest moments, a source of sustenance. Survival and meaning often walked hand in hand. Fire was humanity's greatest tool, a source of warmth on freezing nights, light in the darkness, protection from predators, and a way to cook food that was easier to eat and safer to consume. But for some groups, it wasn't just a tool for living, it was a weapon for winning. Picture a rival clan sheltering inside a cave. Instead of charging in with spears, you quietly stack dry branches at the entrance, set them alight, and let the smoke roll in. The trapped face two choices: suffocate inside or flee into enemy hands. Archaeological evidence from sites in Europe and Africa shows layers of ash, burned structures, and human remains in patterns that suggest deliberate fire setting. Not accidents, but strategy. Fire could flush enemies out, wipe out food stores, collapse wooden shelters, and make caves uninhabitable for weeks. Even when it didn't kill, it was displaced. And the psychological effect was just as powerful as the flames themselves, unpredictable, all-consuming, leaving nothing behind but scorched earth and fear. In the prehistoric world, that made fire the ultimate weapon. It didn't just destroy enemies, it erased their place in the world. Darkness wasn't just a time to hide, it was a time to strike. Early Homo sapiens and Homo heidelbergensis sometimes hunted under the cover of night, moving in total silence toward dangerous prey. No blazing torches to give them away, no loud shouts, only subtle hand signals, coordinated movement, and hardened wooden spears. The risk was immense. Lions, giant hyenas, and saber-toothed predators owned the night. But the reward, rich meat, life-sustaining fat, and precious marrow, could feed entire groups for days. Night hunts forged trust, demanded discipline, and sharpened strategy. And when you combine that with the willingness to practice cannibalism, weaponize fire, and use psychological warfare, you see the complete picture of early human survival. Clever, ruthless, and endlessly adaptable. Our ancestors weren't saints or monsters. They were survivors in a world that demanded both creativity and cruelty. Every step we take today rests on the bones, sometimes literally, of those who came before us. If you found this journey into our raw, untamed past fascinating, go ahead and like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in humanity's most haunting stories.